The President's speech discerned a new type of politics which does not involve political parties or partisan politics. Instead, it involves political lobby groups with shared agendas. This may be described as ideological politics, which throws up standard political dichotomies like conservative-liberal or left-right. Like most labels, these are oversimplistic. A Talmudic proverb instructs us to examine the contents, not the label, of a bottle, which is wise if we are interested in substance over sound bites, with rigorous argument over aggressive rhetoric. Bald assertions must not be allowed to masquerade as arguments. For example, chanting the mantra of being inclusive evades the more basic question of what to include or exclude and why. Dante Alighieri, in his poem The Divine Comedy, wrote, "The hottest places in hell are reserved for those who remain neutral in times of great moral crisis." Concerned citizens will always want to speak to the moral or ethical basis of law and policy, and their views will differ depending on the religious or non-religious philosophies shaping their moral beliefs. Intellectual honesty knows there is no neutral ground in public debate over moral issues. Anyone who believes in a system of ethics must make moral judgments and discriminate between right and wrong. If you tell someone, "Thou shalt not judge," they may retort, "But thou art judging me," or in more contemporary parlance, "Who died and made you king?" A relativist may argue there are no moral absolutes. It all depends on the person. However, in saying there are no moral absolutes, the relativist is being inconsistent in making an absolute statement about morality. If morality is subjective, a consistent relativist cannot defend the correctness of any contingent moral position. The truth is, anyone speaking for or against the position acts as an advocate. We all come to public debate proposing specific moral views. Only the government may impose a view by law. Parliament must decide what morality to clothe beneficial legislation with. Where there are diverse views, an overlapping consensus may be possible through patient dialogue. However, consensus may be elusive, if not impossible, on controversial questions of law and profound moral disagreement. This is the reality of politics and a persistent feature of philosophical pontification and theological discourse. In this context, the President reminds us of the overriding objective to live peacefully together despite our differences. The constitutional liberty to speak and debate cannot flourish without order and prudent self-restraint. Neither religion nor irreligion has the right to break the peace. A commitment to free democratic debate entails protecting speech we disagree with. Voltaire said, "I disapprove of what you say, but I would defend to the death your right to say it." This is tolerance applied to dissenting views, which must be reciprocated to succeed. Sir, Madam, a militant model of secularism calls for a dogmatic separation of religion and state. In such jurisdictions, people may object when others with religiously informed values debate public policy. When French President Sarkozy advocated a positive secularism which views religion as an asset, not a danger, he provoked many in a country with a strong anti-clerical tradition dating back to the bloody French Revolution, who thought this violated strict French secularism. In contrast, religion, which may not include a belief in God or gods, is generally viewed in Singapore as a constructive social force, although the government appreciates its destabilizing proclivities where abused for political gain. In a recent interview, DPM Wong Kan Seng reiterated that religion and politics must not be mixed as a basic rule of engagement. This is sound, though there are difficulties of definition, as no bright light demarcates religion from politics. We need to understand what secularism entails in Singapore for more specific guidance. Singapore, like many other countries, bucks the secularization thesis arising out of Europe. This postulates that religious belief declines as societies modernize. Clearly, the European experience cannot be universalized. As Singapore modernizes, it remains a religious society within a secular state, where 80% of Singaporeans profess a religious faith. A state's attitude towards religion turns upon its model of constitutional secularism. Secularism is a protein, comedian-like term. What it means depends on the context and who is using it. It can be a virtue or a vice. Secularism has been used to describe varied state attitudes towards religion, from support to antagonism to benevolent neutrality. It is timely to eschew glibness and examine the Singapore model of secularism with precision. There are, in fact, many secularisms or degrees of secularity. This complex term needs to be unpacked. Historically, secularism originates from the Latin seculum, meaning temporal worldly affairs rather than spiritual otherworldly matters. The word secular is an emblem of intense historical conflict. Atheists like George Holyoake in 1846 used it to indicate disinterest rather than opposition to religion. Today, in some circles, secularism connotes systematic hostility towards religion as a synonym for a politicized form of ideological atheism whose creed is that humanity is destined to wholly shed religious conviction. The atheistic word was made flesh in the atheistic state produced by the Russian Revolution of 1917, devoted to Marx's assumption that religion stupefies the masses and must be eradicated to bring forth the new communist man. The other prophets of evangelical atheism include Sigmund Freud and Friedrich Nietzsche, who famously declared God is dead and considered religiosity the intellectual infancy of humanity. Some still speak with this same hubris, advocating that the poison of religion be banned from the public square. This brand of illiberal atheism is peddled in their best-selling books, espousing untutored views that denigrate religion as foolish superstition. In origins, the principle of secularity dates back to the Roman Empire. It derives from the teaching of Jesus of Nazareth to render unto Caesar the things that are Caesar's and to God the things that are God's. This principle of limited government opposed state absolutism in suggesting Caesar did not wield absolute authority. While a citizen was to obey civil authority, he was to enjoy freedom from state interference in matters pertaining to the worship of God. Religious liberty thus limits state power. America first experimented constitutionally with dividing sacred from secular authority, rejecting the European conflation of civil and religious power. This idea of two jurisdictions was revolutionary in ancient Rome, where emperors, as political leaders, were worshipped as gods. Early Christians who refused to worship Caesar were thrown to lions in the circus for committing treason, not blasphemy. Senior Minister of State Zainal Abidin Rashid described Singapore secularism as secularism with the soul. This deft juxtaposing of the material and the metaphysical speaks of the cooperative relation between state and religion in Singapore. The Constitution does not forbid the state to lend financial or other support to a religion. Thus, we have the Islamic Religious Council as a statutory government body serving the Muslim community. In 1989, Foreign Affairs Minister George Yeo observed the government was secular, but it is certainly not atheistic. This evinces a rejection of a thick atheistic version of secularism. A thick secularism constitutes a substantive ideology which, like any other religion, speaks to first-order questions of life and death and how human action ought to be guided. Secular humanism, which posits a morality independent of God, is a comprehensive anti-theistic worldview. Some courts recognize it as a religion. It dogmatically asserts the absence of God without empirical evidence. We know from elementary logic that it is impossible to prove a universal negative. Whether God exists or not cannot be proved or disproved by evidence or logic. It takes faith